The following is a DW Ancient Egypt production. In the last episode, we discussed the end of the 19th Dynasty and left off with Queen Twosret. Her death ended in confusion and civil war. One of the most important rules in life can be learned from the last great pharaoh of Egypt, who should have paid more attention to Pepi I. Be careful of a disgruntled queen. The topics of this episode include Pharaoh Setnakhte, Pharaoh Ramesses III, the Harem conspiracy papyrus, tomb KV-11, Ramses III's mortuary temple at Medinet Habu, and the Great Harris papyrus. Pharaoh Setnakhte. A rise of new order began under Pharaoh Setnakhte, who established the 20th dynasty. He was a man of unknown origins who seized the throne during a time of crisis and political unrest, likely from Twosret, and he was presumably a minor descendant of Ramses II through a separate family line from that of Seti II, Siptah, and Twosret. Ruling from 1190 to 1186 BC, Setnakhte put down Asiatic rebellions, reopened temples, and restored their revenues. While his reign was comparatively brief, it was just long enough for him to stabilize the political situation in Egypt and establish his son, Ramses III, as successor. Setnakhte began work on his tomb KV-11, but stopped when the tomb builders accidentally broke into the tomb of Pharaoh Ramesses in KV-10. He constructed the entrance, the first two corridors, and the first chamber before abandoning KV-11. He then appropriated the tomb of Queen Twosret in KV-14. The remainder of this tomb would be completed by Ramses III. Pharaoh Ramesses III. The last of the great pharaohs of Egypt, Ramesses III consolidated his position and continued his father's efforts to stabilize the country. There were no problems in Nubia, since that had now more or less achieved again the status of a subdued colony. The outside world of the Mediterranean was a different story. Ruling from 1186 to 1155 BC, Ramses III would not have the same stability like Ramses II. Times were changing. This was now the Greek Dark Ages, which were experiencing the Trojan War, the fall of Mycenae, and a great surge of displaced people seeking new lands. A tidal wave of foreign invaders was about to break upon the shores of Egypt. The first signs of trouble came in year 5 with an attack from the west. The Libyans invaded and attempted to force their way into the fertile lands of the western delta. The Egyptian army responded and managed to annihilate them. However, in year 8, a more serious invasion was attempted by the Sea Peoples. They had returned from their earlier attempt involving Ramses II and had since organized into a confederation. These people were sufficiently desperate and well armed enough to have destroyed the mighty Hittite Empire. While waiting a while in Syria, they were now moving south toward Egypt, who took them very seriously. These invasions were not just military operations, but movements of large populations by land and sea who were seeking permanent settlement. Ramses III didn't hesitate and assembled a vast army to meet them on the eastern frontier. He fought a land and sea battle and was victorious in halting their advance. The details of these battles are unfortunately unknown. Keep in mind the Egyptians were terrible sailors and avoided the open sea at all costs. When thinking about these sea battles, picture a landlocked battle on the Nile for a more historically accurate picture. For 3 years, Egypt was quiet. Then came trouble on the western border again, involving the Libyans and Sea Peoples. The frontier forts took the brunt of the attack as the invaders again attempted to overrun the delta. The campaign description occurs on the inner north side wall of the first pylon at Ramses III's mortuary temple at Medinet Habu. The heavy cost of these battles slowly exhausted Egypt's treasury and contributed to the gradual decline of the Egyptian empire in Asia. Every battle won was attributed to the god Amun, and the spoils of war were building up the wealth of the Amun priesthood. This was going to have disastrous consequences in the following dynasty. Ramses III and Ramses II were not related. The third is from the 20th dynasty, and the second is from the 19th, but Ramses III wanted to be like him. He even named his sons after the great, using names like Amun-Herkhepshef and Kayam-Wasid. Like Ramses II, the third would outlive these sons, who would be buried in the Valley of the Queens. The last 20 years of his reign are not documented, a kind of mystery, one that points to a period of decline. The Harem Conspiracy Papyrus. Through the discovery of the Harem Conspiracy Papyrus, it is now known that there was a plot to kill the king. This began with the motivation of a minor Queen T, who wanted her son, Prince Pentawore, to succeed to the throne. This murder was carried out, but the conspirators were caught and the crown passed to the king's designated successor, Ramesses IV. He had the conspirators, who were all personally known to the king, rounded up and put on trial. Now, punishment in Egypt was different than our current Western philosophy of rehabilitation. Jails and prisons were a strange concept to the ancient Egyptians and to the ancient world for that matter. Why imprison someone for doing something wrong? It was a strain on your resources. Someone did something bad, so you put them somewhere and support them? Why do that? A better way was to make the punishment quick and over with. These included the removal of ears and noses, or execution, which in Egypt was a terrible thing. The ancient Egyptian government executed someone by impaling them on a stake. 14 officials were called to sit in judgment. They included 7 royal butlers, 2 treasury overseers, 2 army standard bearers, 2 scribes, and a herald. The commission was given full powers to call whatever evidence was needed, and most unusually, power to deliver and carry out the verdict, even the death penalty, which was normally reserved to the king alone. Those on trial included the chief of the chamber, several butlers, the scribe of the harem, several inspectors of the harem, overseer of the palace, captain of the archers in Nubia, and 6 wives of the people at the harem gate. During the trial, evidence emerged of a plot to incite revolt outside the palace to coincide with the intended coup within. Over 40 people were implicated and were tried in groups. The record of Queen T's trial has not survived, but she was most definitely killed. 28 people, including the major ringleaders, were found guilty and almost certainly put to death. The second prosecution condemned 6 people who were forced to commit suicide within the court itself. In the third prosecution, the 4 people involved, who included Prince Pentawore, were condemned to suicide, although not immediately within the court, but presumably in their cells. During the trial, some of the accused harem girls tried to seduce members of the court, but they were caught in the act. One judge was found innocent, the others were condemned to have their ears and nose amputated. A butler, who was one of the convicted judges, committed suicide before the sentence could be carried out. Tomb KV-11. Ramesses III was buried in tomb KV-11, one of the largest tombs in the valley. The tomb was originally abandoned by his father after it struck KV-10, but Ramesses III continued the work. The tomb's entrance is flanked by 2 bovine-headed pilasters. The entrance is followed by 2 corridors, one with 2 side chambers, the other with 8 chambers. Beyond the second corridor, the cutting of a third corridor on the axis of the tomb broke through the ceiling of KV-10. The right wall was cut further to the west, transforming the corridor into a chamber. A continuation of corridor D2, with its axis shifted to the west and not parallel to the original axis, has a floor inclined upwards, possibly to avoid further collision with KV-10. This corridor is succeeded by well chamber E, a pillared chamber F with a side chamber and a central descent, another corridor G, 2 square chambers, a large burial chamber with 4 side chambers, and 3 more small chambers beyond. The burial chamber is an 8-pillared hall that once housed the red granite sarcophagus. The entrance, the first 2 corridors, room D1, and the entry to corridor D2 originally bore the names of Setnakhte. These were, however, re-inscribed for Ramesses III, for whom the remainder of the tomb was decorated as well. The 188-meter-long tomb was beautifully decorated. He has one of the most unique scenes in his tomb. Only the nobles produced secular scenes on their tomb walls to show the gods where and what they wanted to do in the afterlife. The royalty, the kings, had to produce religious scenes. Ramesses III does this, but he also creates one of the only secular scenes in a royal tomb. It's a scene of 2 harpists, although now much damaged when compared to the earlier copies made when it was first discovered. The tomb is often referred to as the Tomb of the Harpers. The mummy of Ramesses III was found in the Deir el-Bahri cache of 1881. Along with Amenhotep II's mummy, these were the only royal male mummies that did not show any post-mortem trauma inflicted by tomb robbers, although he was far from being in good condition. Ramesses III's mummy was the model for Hollywood when they created the mummy movies in the early 1930s. Movies like The Mummy's Tomb, The Mummy's Hand, The Mummy's Curse. Not the Boris Karloff's original mummy movie, but the sequels. As Egyptologist Bob Breyer notes, the scarf around his neck was modeled after Ramesses III's mummy. The mummy had been in such bad shape that when the mummy was refurbished in ancient times, the Egyptian priests used a stick to hold the head on and wrapped a piece of linen around the neck to help secure his head in place and to hide that the neck was damaged. Ramesses III's Mortuary Temple. Ramesses III's Mortuary Temple at Medinet Habu is one of the best preserved temples of the New Kingdom. Made out of stone, these walls are 30 foot thick. The temple, some 490 feet long, is of Orthodox design and closely resembles the nearby mortuary temple of Ramesses II, the Ramesseum. The temple precinct measures approximately 690 feet by 1,000 feet and contains more than 75,347 square feet of decorated wall reliefs. Its walls are relatively well preserved, and it is surrounded by a massive mud brick enclosure, which may have been fortified. The entrance copies a Syrian fortified gateway, which makes it one of the most unique mortuary temples in Egypt. The first pylon leads into an open courtyard, lined with colossal statues of Ramesses III as Osiris on one side and uncarved columns on the other. The second pylon leads into a peristyle hall, again featuring columns in the shape of Ramesses. The third pylon is reached by continuing up a ramp that leads through a columned portico and then opens into a large hypostyle hall, which has lost its roof. Reliefs and actual heads of foreign captives were also found placed within the temple, perhaps in an attempt to symbolize Egypt's control over Syria and Nubia. On the outer north wall, scenes from his campaigns against the Sea Peoples are depicted. One of the most interesting scenes includes a Philistine prisoner who is easily identified by his very distinct headdress. This location was also used as a palace when he was in Thebes for official occasions or religious festivals. His primary residence was in Memphis, the administrative capital. The Great Harris Papyrus. During the reign of Ramesses IV, the Great Harris Papyrus was created, which detailed the life of Ramesses III. This is the longest known papyrus from ancient Egypt, measuring 133 feet long. The text consists of 117 columns, 12 to 13 lines each, that list the endowments for Ramses III's mortuary temple at Medinet Habu. The bulk of the Great Harris Papyrus charts the annual temple festivals and his gifts to them over the 31 years of his reign. According to the papyrus, Ramesses III gave immense gifts to the temples, which included cattle, land, cloth, oil, and wine. This papyrus was discovered in a private tomb nearby and takes its name from a Mr. Anthony Charles Harris, who bought it in 1855. It was later entered into the British Museum in 1872. It must, at some time, been part of the official archives of the temple at Medinet Habu, but how it got from there and into a small private tomb remains a mystery. Perhaps the robbers of Ramses III's tomb found the papyrus and sold it as the Book of the Dead. Remember, most Egyptians were illiterate at the time. Here, he thought he had the Book of the Dead, when in fact he had the administrative record from Ramses III's reign. The greatness of the Egyptian pharaohs ends with Ramses III. Egypt would no longer experience political and economic power. A series of invasions and internal problems would continue to plague the country for the remainder of its history. We'll feature the end of the New Kingdom in the next episode.